Let's start Mounce chapter 6 by looking at the handout here. This chapter is about the article, which is the way to say the in Greek, and the first two cases, which are the nominative and the accusative cases in the Greek language. There are basically four main cases, so you tackle two now, you tackle the other two in the 7th chapter, and then he introduces the 5th case, which occurs just in not frequently, so some rare instances where you're addressing somebody, and it's called the vocative case. It's where we would call that in English a noun of direct address. So let's start with the handout here. In Greek, we have nouns. Nouns are commonly described as those words in a language which name a person, a place, or a thing, or an idea, or a concept, or whatever. And you can actually qualify this ad infinitum. But Greek nouns do consist of two things. There will be a noun stem, and then case endings that are added to the stem. So every Greek noun is going to have a case ending of some sort. To put it another way, you will never find a stem of a noun where there's not also a case ending attached to it. Now, sometimes the case ending will be what I call zero. That is, no case ending. To not add a case ending is itself a case ending, which indicates a particular case. So I'm not lying when I say you're not supposed to really see stems out there. Every stem has some implied case ending with it when you see a Greek noun. So let's talk about those case endings and the stems. Let's start with stems. Nouns have a stem that commonly end in omicron, alpha, or eta. Some have stems that end with consonants. We're not going to meet those until we get to chapter 10. But for now, we're going to deal with the stems that end with vowels. So omicron, alpha, or eta will be what the stem ends with. So I've given you two examples of nouns in Greek here, logos and anthropos, word and man. And I want you to notice here that in the form logos, we have the stem loga. So there, notice the stem ends with what? An omicron. And then the sigma that you see here is the actual case ending. So two constituent parts of the noun, stem, case ending. Logoi is the word for words, and then this includes the stem, loga, but here the case ending iota, and that pluralizes it. Anthropos has the stem anthropa, ends with an omicron, all of these do, and sigma for the case ending man, one man. Anthropoi is plural, men, same stem, but a different case ending. So all nouns have both of these, okay, at least a stem and a case ending. We do have this asterisk here next to the stem. The asterisk is simply indicating that the stem loga is a theoretical form that doesn't occur precisely in this way in the language. There's always a case ending attached to it, so you won't see loga just hanging out all by itself anywhere. The stem of a noun is going to be the part of the word that constitutes the semantic meaning or content of the word. The case ending will give you grammatical information. All right? So if you notice over here, these are the same case endings, the sigma over here and the sigma over here. What they're telling you is two things about the nouns logos and anthropos. It tells you that those nouns are singular and nominative case. The iota is the same for both of these forms, logoi and anthropoi, and they tell you that the noun is plural and nominative. But those case endings by themselves don't give you any more information than that. So how do I know I'm talking about plural words as opposed to plural men? Well, I have to go to the stem for that kind of information. That's what I mean by the semantic or the lexical content of that word, okay? So Our case endings will give us grammatical information, not necessarily lexical information. 1.2, case endings. Greek has 4 main cases. The 5th one, not so common, whose inflectional endings serve to indicate grammatical information about the noun, its function within the sentence, and its number. So those are the 2 grammatical pieces that you get from the case. What do I mean by function? Well, things like whether it's the subject or the direct object. By number, whether it's singular or plural. So logos versus logoi. Notice that difference in case ending here. The part word is the concept that logo tells you. The ending s or sigma tells you that it could be nominative, which is the subject of the sentence, and that the noun is singular. Iota tells you that it could also be the subject, but now that it's plural. So both forms of these words could be the subject, but one's singular, one's plural. Now that brings us to the issue of the different case functions that we learned in chapter 6. Nominative case generally marks a noun as the subject of a sentence. Accusative case generally marks a noun as the direct object of a sentence. Hear me well. These are not the only 2 functions of nouns in those 2 cases, but they are the predominant ones. And so when you see a direct object, you should expect it to be in what case? Accusative. When you see a subject, you should expect it to be nominative. Okay? But nominative case nouns can do some other things as well, and we'll learn those in a little while. So here's an example of a sentence where cases are used on the same noun. Why don't you say this with me? Ha anthropos, agapa, ton anthropon. So notice that I have anthropos, anthropon, same word, different forms, different cases, right? Sigma versus the nu. And this means the man as a subject loves the man as a direct object. The nominative case form ends with sigma. The accusative case form ends with the nu here. The article is the word the. Notice that there are some different forms of the article based on case as well. And we will spend a little time talking about the article a little bit later here today. Now this brings us to the concept of declension patterns. What is a declension? A declension is basically an orderly arrangement of how words, particularly nouns, form their inflections. Okay, so a declension is a pattern that a noun follows to form its inflections. We might call them inflectional patterns. Declensions are inflectional patterns. Now, in Greek, there are basically 3 inflectional patterns that nouns can follow. And I want to just start with an English example of what I mean here to try to help you see what I'm talking about, okay? Let's imagine that in English we had some declension patterns. Let's say I have nouns, and we'll call this now this is just totally theoretical as an example in English, okay? Let's say we have first declension patterns of nouns in English. What might those be? Well, let's say that they're the most typical way to form plurals. What's the most common way to form plurals in English? You just add an S in terms of the actual spelling, right? So we'll call the first declension pattern add an S to make it plural. What would be some examples of nouns that would follow our so-called first declension in English? This is not really what English uses, okay? But we don't really have declensions called first declension, but we're making this up. What would be some examples of this? Okay, good. So Bible. In English, I formed the plural of Bible by adding S. Good. Give me one more. But you're cheating. I already gave you that one. But you're right. So book becomes book. So let's call that the first declension. Let's create a second declension in English. And what would be another way to form a plural besides adding S? Okay, so changing internal vowels. So we'll call that vowel change. Okay? Now, what would be some examples of this? Knife? Yeah, let's try a different one. Okay, good. Well, here, you're using one of my examples, right? Foot becomes, feet. Foot becomes feet. Good. What's another one? Goose becomes geese. Okay, excellent. That's it. Those are good examples. Now, we also have a third sort of declension pattern, don't we? What's that? Yeah, add en. Okay, so examples. Ox, oxen. Box? No, I'm just kidding. Not boxen, is it? Okay, good. So that would be another one. We don't have very many words that do this. There is a fourth declension pattern, too, for forming plurals in English. What would that be? Stay the same. Do nothing. Okay, so give me an example. So here, we'll just put do nothing. Okay, good. So fish. Fish can be singular or plural, can't it? What's another one? Moose. The plural is moosen. Meese. No. What is it? It's mooses. I'm pretty sure it's mooses. So that would follow the first declension. But how about deer? Yes. Deer and deer. He shot 5 deer. Okay? So now let's just say that we've exhausted all the English declensions now. First, second, third, and fourth. Every time you learn a new English word, if you're not a native English speaker, you would want to know what? Which declension pattern does my new noun that I've learned follow? So you don't know English and you find this really cool word, brick. Someone shot a brick. Now he shot 2 of those. How will I make it plural? Does it follow the fourth declension? He shot 2 brick? No. Does it follow the third declension? He shot some brickin'? Nope. He shot some breek? Nope. That follows the first declension. He shot some bricks, didn't he? Whereas you might come to a woman, for example, and you'd want to know, well, which pattern does that follow? Well, that actually has a double vowel change, doesn't it? You don't say woman's. You don't say woman. You don't say, well, what do? You actually do have the en at the end, like man becomes men, but then your w becomes we, doesn't it? You get women. So that's an interesting one, but it's not following these other patterns. So knowing that there is a set of declension patterns in English will help you as a non-native English speaker to then know what to do with new words you come across. Well, guess what? Greek does the same thing. Greek has 3 main declension patterns. Once you learn the basic pattern using these paradigm words we're going to learn, these model words, then you'll basically know what to do with new words, because we'll tell you, oh, that's a third declension word. It'll follow third declension pattern. This word's first declension in Greek, the first declension Greek pattern, and so it'll follow these other first declension patterns that you learned in the chapter. Does that make sense? All right, very good. So let's talk about first declension. Nouns that have stems ending with alpha or eta follow the Greek's first declension pattern. And these are usually feminine nouns. Not exclusively so, but usually so. So take a look at he graphe. Now the word he here is the feminine article, the feminine form of the article. So this is the graphe. Who knows what graphe means? Yes, writing or scripture. He zoe. What's that? The life. Very good. So everybody say that with me. He graphe. He zoe. So did you notice that these words have eta stems? They have stems that end with eta. You've learned another word, he hora. What does that mean? Our. And that ends with that's a stem that ends with an alpha. Okay? And again, the hey tells me that these are feminine forms because this is the feminine form of the article. Now, second declension nouns are nouns whose stem ends in omicron. And I want you to be very careful here. You might want to underline this or highlight it. I am not talking about the word ending with eta and alpha, and I'm not talking about the word ending with omicron. I'm talking about the stem. The stem. The stem is what ends with eta, alpha, or omicron. This will become meaningful here in just a few minutes, I hope. Okay? So if the stem ends in omicron, it's going to follow the second declension. What gender are second declension nouns whose stem ends with an omicron? Typically they are masculine or neuter. Well, have I covered all my genders now? Yeah. Masculine, feminine, and neuter. So that this is basically how they shake out. If they're first declension, they're usually feminine. If they're second declension, they're usually masculine or neuter. So some examples of masculine forms. Everybody say this with me. Ha logos. So the article form ha is masculine singular. Logos. Ha anthropos. So the word and the man. The neuter forms, everybody, ta ergon is what? The work, good, and ta sabaton. What do you think that is? The Sabbath. So the article form ta is neuter. Okay? So my basic article forms that are singular and nominative are ha, he, and ta. Okay? Masculine, feminine, neuter. Whenever Mounce gives you a new noun in your vocab list, guess what he's going to give you? He's always going to give you the article that accompanies it so that you'll know what gender it is. Here's the deal with nouns. Nouns do not get to change their gender willy-nilly. They don't get to change their gender at all. When a noun is masculine, it's always masculine in Greek. When a noun is feminine, it's always feminine. If it's neuter, it's always neuter. So he only has to give you one article form, and now you'll know which gender it follows, right? So ha is masculine, he is feminine, ta is neuter. Now, third declension nouns are nouns with stems ending in a consonant. Alpha, eta, and omicron are stems that end with vowels, right? So these are stems that end with vowels, but there are some stems that end with consonants. They're called consonantal stems, and that's third declension. And those sorts of nouns could be any gender, and we will learn about those in chapter 10. So let's take a look at some examples in our sentences here. 241. The nominative singular case ending in the first declension is zero ending. Now, who remembers what gender first declension nouns usually are? Feminine. And what do those stems usually end with? Eta and alpha. Very good. So take a look at our example here. I have he graphe. Say that with me. Didaske. So that's the scripture teaches. This S is not saying singular. It's the S stands for subject. Okay. So the scripture teaches tananthropon. The scripture teaches the man. So notice here that in the nominative case, he graphe, my stem ends with eta, and I'm going to use this little symbol to mark that there is no case ending. The absence of a case ending, I like to call zero ending, to indicate that it is an ending, it's just the ending zero. To choose not to use a case ending is to put your noun in the nominative case if it's a first declension noun. Okay? So what you're looking at here is a nominative first declension singular noun. Now, over here, under the second one, the nominative masculine singular case ending in the second declension is a sigma. So look at our expression. Say this with me. Ha anthropos. So the man, And the man here is nominative. This is subject. Didaske teaches. Tein graphein teaches the scripture. Notice here that my noun stem is anthropa with an omicron as the stem's final vowel right there. And the sigma I see is the case ending. Now the nominative case ending is attached to the stem. Over here it wasn't. First declension nouns do not attach a case ending. The case ending in the nominative is 0. But sigma is the nominative case ending for masculine second declension nouns. So, the man teaches the scripture. Now, based on these two sentences, can you guess what the case ending is for accusative first and second declension nouns? Accusative, direct object forms. That's right, it's new. You see the new here and the new there, okay? So my stem ends with omicron and eta, whether it's first or second declension, but they do happen to have the same case ending when they're accusative. And that's really nice that they are the same. All right? So keeping in mind that I said it's the noun stem that ends with omicron that makes it second declension, not that the word ends with an omicron, because look at anthropos over here and look at anthropon over here. Do either of those forms of the word end with an omicron? No, neither of them do, but they are second declension, not because the word ends with an omicron, but because the stem ends with an omicron. Okay? All right. 2.5. Note, nouns will follow only one declension pattern, since their actual declension pattern is determined by what the noun stem ends with. So once I learn a noun, I'm going to look at the noun stem and say, what does it end with? If it ends with omicron, you know what pattern it follows, don't you? Which one? Second declension. Good. If it ends with alpha, it follows first. Not if the noun ends with alpha, if the stem ends with alpha. If the stem ends with eta, it follows the first declension. And if the stem ends with a consonant, it follows the third declension. Great. Now, under 2.6, we just point out here that some nouns are indeclinable. That is to say, they do not alter their endings to mark their case function. Examples are words like Israel in Greek, the word Israel. So what you're going to find is this. Usually, typical Greek words are declinable and will follow a declension pattern. But when you take a language that's not natively Greek, like Hebrew, and you start speaking Greek in that context, what are you going to do? You're going to borrow those Hebrew words into the Greek language. And the Greek speakers are going to do one of two things. They're going to make those Hebrew words sound more Greek and decline them like Greek words, or they're just going to transliterate them and let them sound like Hebrew words, and then they won't decline them. So Israel is not a Greek word, and so it doesn't get declined like typically Greek words would. All right? In English, we have some funny, things that we do with foreign words as well. We have a lot of borrowed words in English. We have a lot of French words that have come into the English language because of the Norman conquest. And then we have a lot of Spanish words and then, Greek and Latin roots. So what do we do with Latin-based words when we want to make them plural? This becomes a conundrum for us, isn't it? Think about the word alumnus. Okay? You've been to college. You're an alumnus of the college. So if you're a woman, what are you? Well, technically, you're an alumna because Latin marks gender, number, right, and case. So alumnus is technically the masculine singular form of an alum. Alumna is feminine. So if there are many of you, you are alumni, or are you alumnuses? Okay. I have no idea what the English language will do in the next 100 years with that. I'm pretty sure they're going to standardize it. But think about octopus. What's the plural of octopus? Octopi. Or is it octopuses? Which one do you think is going to win in 100 years? I think octopuses will win. Okay? So anyhow, you can see how this works, right? All right. Let's move on to the next thing.